This letter is strongly obsessed with the division into two parts. So it says, and you shall take fine flour and bake with it, and here we go, a bunch of twos. Hold up, Sword of Laban. This has nothing to do with the spirit world. We know from D&C that all this white stone stuff is celestial imagery, but just wait till you hear the next thing. That will seal the deal. To someone at that time who hears mention of a hidden mana, what are they going to think? This is hidden mana, which is the hidden or in the temple bread, with a fortified and safe citadel or a space in the middle of it, and that is paradise. Welcome to Sword of Laban. This is a continuation of a series showing how John the Revelator's 7 letters to 7 churches corresponds perfectly to the LDS/Mormon understanding of the plan of salvation. I've already covered the first letter, how it strongly alludes to premortality, and the second letter, how it alludes to mortality, and today we're going to talk about the third letter. If you haven't watched those, then I'll put a link in the video description or in a comment to a playlist of all the plan of salvation videos, which include those 2 videos, so go check that out. And take a second right now to move your thumb over to that like button and subscribe. Okay, let's dive in. We're in Revelation chapter 2, verses 12 to 17. Now, verse 12. To the church in Pergamos write. Now, Pergamos will correspond to spirit paradise and prison, as I said. Now, Pergamos and Pergamum refer to the same ancient city. The name is written as Pergamum in most historical and academic texts, while the book of Revelation uses the Greek transliteration Pergamos. Before I get into the meat of this letter, and believe me, it's mind-blowing, especially at the end when he talks about hidden bread and a white stone. Anyway, allow me a short detour while I describe the LDS conception of what happens after we die, for those that may not be familiar. And don't click away, the more exciting stuff is just beyond this. So Latter-day Saint spirit paradise and prison is not the Christian conception of heaven and hell, even though I am talking about an afterlife here. It's more like a temporary place that the spirits of the dead go while they await the resurrection. Those spirits that chose to follow Christ in this life or the next, and who let Christ take away their sins, will dwell in a place we call paradise. And those that need to suffer for their own sins because they don't let Christ take those sins upon himself will go to prison. In the Book of Mormon, Alma chapter 40, Alma is talking to his son Corianton. He says right here, Now I unfold unto you a mystery. I show unto you one thing which I have inquired diligently of God that I might know. And in verse 6, Now there must needs be a space betwixt the time of death and the time of resurrection. So, just because of the way of time and mortality works with the whole birth, death, families thing, we can't all be on Earth at once, right? We come to Earth gradually and in stages. And therefore, because of that reality, because that's just the way it works, there has to be this sort of waiting room after death for those that have passed on before us, where they wait until the whole work is done and it's time for the resurrection. And of course, it's not really just waiting around. There's plenty to do there, but we'll cover that in other videos. Continuing, he asks what will become of the souls of men from this time of death until the time appointed for the resurrection, right there in verse 7. And if we scroll down to verse 9, it says, This is the thing which I have inquired diligently of the Lord to know, and this is the thing of which I do know. Then in verse 11, Now concerning the state of the soul between death and the resurrection, behold, it has been made known unto me by an angel, that the spirits of all men, as soon as they are departed from this mortal body, yea, the spirits of all men, whether they be good or evil, are taken home to that God who gave them life. And let's go down to verse 12. And then it shall come to pass that the spirits of those who are righteous are received into a state of happiness, which is called paradise, a state of rest, a state of peace, where they shall rest from all their troubles and all care and sorrow. And it shall come to pass the spirits of the wicked, yea, who are evil, etc., shall be put somewhere else, which we call, it doesn't say the word prison here, but we often call that spirit prison. And it goes on. But importantly, in verse 13 here, we learn that these spirits are not in prison because God put them there. God didn't take these spirits and shove them in a prison cell behind bars and slam the door and lock it shut. No, it says all of this punishment and weeping and wailing and gnashing of teeth is because of the person's own iniquity. So these spirits are there because they don't want to be in paradise. They don't do what's required to exit that state and to enter a better state. Okay, that was a long detour, but important, I think. Let's take a look back at John the Revelator's third letter. Chapter 2, verse 12. To the church in Pergamos, write this. Pause. Okay, we are not making quick progress in this video, are we? We're only a few words into the text of this letter. Sorry, but we got to pause here. Let's look at this word Pergamos. The meaning of this word is a citadel or acropolis. And a citadel or acropolis is a protected or a fortified part of a city, which is often built on a hill for added safety. And this word Pergamos can also by extension mean height or elevation, because it's usually like up in a high spot. So it's this fortified sanctum of a city that looks down on the city. Indeed, the ancient city Pergamos was well known for this type of citadel that was built on a hill in case of invasion, and you can see the ruins of this same citadel today if you visit Pergamos. This citadel is perched high on a hill overlooking the surrounding Bakurice plain, offering panoramic views. This acropolis, or citadel, was the heart of this ancient city and housed important structures such as monumental temples and theaters and a library and royal palaces. So, this citadel is a safe and a fortified space that's sort of separated from the chaos around it, right? Where you build and you put all the important and valuable stuff inside. And when people go in there, they will be safe from any kind of outside influence or invasion. Now hold up, let's contrast this with how we usually think of paradise and prison. We usually think of this as a circle that's divided in half along the equator. So, I don't know, maybe the paradise is north, so maybe the good people are in the northern hemisphere and the bad people are, I don't know, in Australia or something. No, I'm totally kidding, but obviously this is not a good mental model. What's a better mental model for paradise and prison? Well, maybe the good gathered in one place and who are free to, roam around, they're free. And the bad gathered in another place, but they're inside of a prison, right? They've got bars and doors and they can't get out. But wait, this isn't a good mental model for paradise and prison either. Remember, nobody is putting these prisoners into a prison. They're there because they don't want to exit their state and enter a better one. So, a much better mental model is, I think, for paradise and prison, of the righteous being inside of a fortified enclosure, maybe a citadel, where they're safe and free, as Alma says, in chapter 40 of Alma, rest from all their troubles and from all care and sorrow. And then, where are the unrighteous? Well, those are those who are outside of this citadel, who don't enter it because they aren't willing to do what it takes to enter, which is to accept and follow Christ. So they mill around outside in their miserable state, while those inside the citadel can look out and over them and see those same surroundings from a higher perspective. In fact, I have consistently depicted spirit paradise and prison in my videos as a circle with a horizontal dividing line, but I just did that so it's recognizable, because that's what we usually draw. But I really think it's a much better description is for a circle with a fortified and a safe citadel or space in the middle of it, and that is paradise. And I think this is kind of ironic that we call the outside space, right, outside the citadel, we call that prison. Because the interior of that fortified space is in many ways like a reverse prison, meaning prison is everything outside of it, and safety is the thing inside of it, inside of its doors, inside of its bars. Anyway, hopefully you see this dualistic nature here in this concept of a citadel with an inner space and an outer space. This dualism, or this division of things into two, just totally permeates this letter. To wit, verse 12, continuing, "These things saith he which hath the sharp sword with two edges." Again, the first thing in John's formula for writing a letter is to give, first address the church and then to give some description of Christ, saying, Christ told me to tell you these things. But always in this description of Christ is an encoded reference to the phase of the plan of salvation that he's talking about. So here, it's a sharp sword used for dividing something cleanly down the middle. And so you get this idea of two, or a division, and he makes special note that this sword has two edges, which I guess is obvious for many swords, but he points it out because it's a chance to use the number 2, and we'll see that again and again. There are two things in this realm. There is paradise and there is prison. Continuing, verse 13, that's the same phrase that's used for all the churches. And where thou dwellest. Those of you that have watched my Plan of Salvation in Job video will recognize that Job also talks about his spirit paradise as a dwelling place. But for Job, the dualism is between those dwelling in paradise compared with those just in the storehouses of prison, right? Dwellings are nice places to be and to live, and storehouses are just somewhere to be for a while, but it's not a nice place to live. Where Satan's seat is. I suppose this may be just telling us what we already know, which is that spirit paradise and prison is right here on earth, but unseen by us. the same place that the 1/3 part of the host of heaven who were cast out of premortality for rebellion. It says to the faithful in paradise that thou holdest fast my name and hast not denied my faith, even in those days wherein Antipas was my faithful martyr, who was slain among you where Satan dwelleth. Okay, a lot going on there. Hold up, who is this person Antipas first? Well, the name Antipas can either mean against the Father or comparable to / worthy of the Father, which I suppose are opposites, but I'm not sure which one he means, but it's possible he means both, and here's this dualistic thing going on again. But there's more. Tradition holds that Antipas was killed by burning in a brass bull-shaped altar around 54 to 68 AD, and here's some Christian art showing that. Does this look like anything to you? Perhaps it evokes imagery of LDS temple baptismal fonts, where a font of water, not fire, so it's kind of an inversion, sits on the back of oxen or bulls. The early saints did practice baptism for the dead, of course. I'm not sure if they did it in a font sitting on ox statues, but John is pretty smart, and he's a prophet who's playing 4D chess with us right now, so he could have seen this practice in our modern day. And this practice is strongly connected to the spirit world. And this phrase, Antipas who was slain among you, hopefully by now you get what I'm saying. Nobody named Antipas was slain in the spirit world. I'm not saying these things happened in the spirit world. Here, as elsewhere, he's writing a letter, but he's using sequences of words and ideas that allude to an underlying meaning. So, for example, here if he uses the word slain and talks about people that are slain, well, maybe he's talking about the place where the slain go to, right, which is the spirit world. And if he says that a righteous person is slain, maybe he's talking about spirit paradise. So I see verse 13 as talking about spirit paradise, and then verse 14 is talking about spirit prison. So again, there's dualistic theme. Let's read verse 14. I have a few things against thee, because thou hast there them that hold to the doctrine of Balaam, who taught Balak to cast a stumbling block before the children of Israel, to eat things sacrificed unto idols, and to commit fornication. Okay, pause. Who's this Balaam guy and this Balak guy again? So Balak is a king of the Moabites in the Old Testament. He asks Balaam, who is a non-Israelite sorcerer or prophet, to curse the Israelites so that Balak can defeat them. And it's a whole story, but the long story short is Balaam does not curse the Israelites, but he blesses them, much to Balak's annoyance. And prior to that, there's this whole talking donkey incident. But actually, none of that matters here, because the point is what happens immediately after that story. The very next verses in Numbers say that the Israelites start to fornicate with Moabites and start to eat food that was dedicated to their gods. It actually doesn't say that Balaam was the source of this doctrine, but a few chapters later in Numbers 31, we learn that what actually happened was, Balaam wasn't a good guy. When he blessed the Israelites, he was just doing what the true God told him to do. Presumably because he feared what would happen if he didn't. I mean, seeing an angel with a drawn sword on the path can do that to you. But when all this is over and he's blessed instead of cursed the Israelites, he's kind of done his bit, he gets another idea, because he doesn't like the Israelites. He tells the king Balak, basically, okay, so I can't curse these people, because God told me I can't do that, but here's what you can do. You can get the Israelites to curse themselves. All you got to do is get your women to go and corrupt them, and then have those women have the Israelite men to eat this sacrificial food. And the result was that God did curse the Israelites with a plague. So that's in Numbers 31, verse 16, if you want to read it. Okay, so that was a long detour. But basically here in verse 14, it's saying that there are people in the spirit world who have some false doctrine. People who put the stumbling blocks before others in spirit prison, which cause these others to not be able to progress and enter paradise. And this could take the form of preaching of other gods, for example, right here, or other sins. We still have agency in the next life, and at least some forms of sin are totally still possible there, as well as repentance. So thinking out loud for a minute, we might think that everyone who dies is instantly like, wow, look at me, I'm a spirit and I'm floating around. Turns out there was a God and Jesus is the Messiah and I'm going to follow him now. But I don't think that's how it works. Perhaps some people in spirit prison will be preaching, hey, this is it, you've made it, this is heaven. Or maybe the fact that God exists will be obvious because now you're a spirit, so there's obviously another realm. But it still won't be clear to you that Christ is Lord. there could be other gods preached there, for example. Because remember, we don't get our memories of premortality back suddenly when we die. And those in spirit prison can't see into spirit paradise, as far as I can tell. That would be like seeing into the citadel. So all they know is the spirit prison that they see. And maybe that doesn't actually look like a prison at all. Maybe it's just all the stuff around and outside the citadel, which could seem like freedom to somebody in that place. So next we read in verse 15, "So hast thou also them that hold the doctrine of the Nicolaitans, which thing I hate." Now, when we encountered nearly this exact same verse in the last video, John was talking about the destroyer. Remember, this word Nicolaitans refers to the destroyer and his followers that were cast out of premortality. That's the root of the Greek word that translates to Nicholas. So I suppose this is suggesting to us that these spirit followers of Satan are commingling with those in spirit paradise. And then in verse 16, a quick admonition, "Repent, or I will come unto thee quickly, and will fight against them with the sword of my mouth." So here's that sword again, which divides in half. And maybe you're still not convinced that this letter is strongly obsessed with the division into two parts, but just wait till you hear the next thing. That will seal the deal. This next part is mind-blowing. 17. "He that hath an ear, let him hear what the Spirit saith unto the churches." Okay, John says that to every church. Next, "To him that overcometh will I give to eat of the hidden manna, and will give him a white stone, and in the stone a new name written, which no man knoweth, saving he that receiveth it." Okay, hold up, Sword of Laban. This has nothing to do with the spirit world. We know from D&C that all this white stone stuff is celestial imagery, and I suppose the eating of the manna could be terrestrial or celestial, signifying a future feast in a kingdom of glory. To which I say, no. You're still not quite getting it. Here as elsewhere, John says one thing, like in this case, a promise that's made to the faithful about a white stone and manna, but he chooses his words to evoke a strong image of something else underlying that. So John is not saying that in spirit paradise we get a bread and a stone. He is, well, on the one hand, he's saying there's a promise of future bread and a future stone. We all agree on that. But he is also simultaneously, to express that idea, choosing the idea of bread and stone to refer to something special to do with spirit paradise and prison. And what is that? Well, John wants you to think of these two images. Here's the first image, and here's the second image. He wants those two pictures in your brain. Let's look at the first image and how we get there. To someone at that time who hears mention of a hidden manna, what are they going to think? Well, it's hidden manna. It's not regular manna, which is like these sweet white snowflakes on the ground that the Israelites ate. That's regular manna, I suppose. This is hidden manna, which is the hidden or in the temple bread. And anyone who thinks about temple bread will think about the key and most important scripture to that effect in Leviticus, when it defines exactly how this bread should look. In Leviticus 24, it's just got done talking about a candlestick here, which of course is actually a lampstand. They didn't have candles at the time, both in Leviticus and in the book of Revelation. It means lampstand. But anyways, he's just got done talking about a candlestick, so that's also mentioned in Revelation. But then in chapter 24, verse 5, it talks about how this bread in the temple should look, how it should be made, and how it should be laid out. And spoiler alert, the bread is set into two piles. It's divided into two piles. And that's the point. Let's read it. Verse 5, "And thou shalt take fine flour and bake 12 cakes thereof, and 2/10 deals shall be in one cake." A deal is like a measure. "And thou shalt set them in 2 rows, 6 on a row, upon the pure table before the Lord." But it gets even wilder. Let's look at an interlinear Bible. Here is one that is looking at Leviticus 24, verse 5, and you have to read kind of right to left, of course, because this is an interlinear Bible that's got the Hebrew above it. So it says, "And you shall take fine flour and bake with it," and here we go, a bunch of twos. "You shall bake with it thereof 2 and 10 cakes," so there's the number 2. And yeah, I know it's 2 and 10, but it's broken up this way. "And 2, there's another number 2, 2/10 of an ephah," which is a measure. So 2 scoops of flour or whatever. "And then you shall set them in 2 rows. There's another 2 right there. 6 to a row, and so forth. So I don't know. I'm not a Hebrew scholar. I might be reading too much into this 2 and 10 thing. But I guess my point is that even in the number 12, which it says twice in these verses, it calls out this number 2. And practically every other phrase in John's third letter has some connection to a duality of two things. So he's really trying to make a point here. Okay, so that was the bread. Now we've got one more symbol to go over here. This white stone. What does that possibly mean? Let's take a look at an interlinear Bible again. This time it's in Greek, so you're reading left to right, of course. I will give him a white stone. So let's take a look. White is pretty straightforward. Let's click on stone. And the first thing you see is, there's other uses of it in Revelation, talking about a stone and a pebble. But then in Acts, it's actually talking about a vote and a voice against somebody. So what does that mean? Let's go back. And instead of clicking on that name there, the Greek word, we're going to click on that number, which gives us a bit more detail here about how this word is used. And it says that this word means a pebble, a stone, or a vote. Okay, so this is a pebble, or by implication of use as a counter or ballot. And then in Strong's Concordance, the same thing. This is a voting pebble, a small stone. So you and I hear white stone, and we immediately think of what Joseph Smith said about a white stone in terms of a celestial type of context. But of course, that wasn't on the mind of people back then. White stone here, and particularly this particular word, was used for a special kind of white stone that was used for voting. And how this worked, when a group of people had to choose between two things, they would vote. And how they would do that is they have a bowl of black pebbles and a bowl of white pebbles. And these pebbles are these sephos, that word right there. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that correctly. And they would pick up either a white pebble for a yes or a black pebble for a no and put it into a third bowl. That would be then counted up and the verdict would be passed. So back in those days, when you said this word, you were evoking that kind of imagery of this like white voting stone. And of course, he doesn't say black stone, but by implication, he's talking about the white stones. There are also the black stones, right? So again, there's this like dualistic type of wording here where he picks his words carefully so that they relate to this two-part space of paradise and prison in this phase of the plan of salvation. Okay, and so that's the end of the third letter. Tune in next time to go through the fourth letter, which corresponds to the resurrection, millennial reign, and great battle where Satan is loosed at the end. Till then, this is Sort of Laban, out.